We're on the top of Daf Nun Dalet, Amud Aleph, about 7 lines from the top, 6-7 lines from the top, where it says Meisvei. The Gemara here is talking about the halacha of the bracha Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh on Motzei Shabbos. And the Gemara just brought the opinion of Rabbi Binyamin Bar Yefes in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that you make the bracha of Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh Motzei Shabbos and Motzei Yom Kippur as well, but not on any other Yom Tov. So the Gemara here brings a brayse that's a question on this. Meisvei, the question was asked, we learned in the brayse, Ein mevarchen alo ur, elo b'motzei Shabbos. You only make the bracha of Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh on Motzei Shabbos. Why? Hay l'tchilas b'riyasehu. That's the time when fire was first created. So we're thanking the Eibishter for giving us fire. V'kivin sheroye mevarech miyad. Motzei Shabbos, you don't have to wait until you actually make Havdalah and you have the kais and the wine. As soon as you see fire Motzei Shabbos, you can immediately make the bracha. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Seidran ala kais. You say the bracha of Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh and also the bracha on Besamim, together with the rest of Havdalah on the kais of wine. So the machlekes over here is whether you say it separately or you say it on the kais. But what does it say over here? Elo b'motzei Shabbos. You only make the bracha on Motzei Shabbos. So this is a question on Rabbi Yochanan that says that you make the bracha on even Motzei Yom Kippur. And then the Gemara says, V'omer Rabbi Yochanan halacha k'Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yochanan himself said that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So how can he say that you also make a Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh Motzei Yom Kippur? Answers the Gemara, Loi kasha. This is not a question. Kam ba'or sheshavas. When you have a candle that was burning all of Yom Kippur, it's shavas. It was there from before Yom Kippur, and then that's a kind of candle that you can make a bracha on Motzei Yom Kippur, a Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh, and kan ba'or ha'yetzim and ha'etzim and avonim. A candle that comes, or a fire that comes from wood or from striking two rocks one at each other and creating a fire Motzei Shabbos, that's only for Motzei Shabbos. That's not Motzei Yom Kippur. So Rashi, the Mefarshim, the Rishonim here all explain that Motzei Yom Kippur, the reason why you're making the bracha Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh is just to point out the fact that you weren't allowed to use it all of Yom Kippur. All of Yom Kippur, you have the fire burning, but you're not allowed to have a nar from it in the same way you could have during the week. You can't light it on Yom Kippur itself during the week. So that fire comes Motzei Yom Kippur, and now you're able to have the full anar of it, so you make the bracha on that. But that's a Motzei Yom Kippur. Whereas on Motzei Shabbos, you're making a different kind of a bracha. You're making the bracha of Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh to thank the Eibishter for creating it. It's a birchas hashvach to thank the Eibishter. Motzei Yom Kippur, it's more just sort of like a reminder, just to like make the simon to show you that all of Yom Kippur you're not allowed to have a na of it, and now Motzei Yom Kippur you could have a na of it. Tani Chode, we learned in one brayse, Ur hayetzim and eitzim and amavonim, the light, the fire that comes out of the wood or rocks, mevarchem olav. You make a bracha on it. Tani Chada, in another brayse it says, Ei mevarchen olav. You don't make a bracha on this. So it's a contradiction. The answer is like kashya, like we have just said, Kam b'motzei Shabbos, Kam b'motzei Yom Kippurim. On Motzei Shabbos, you light the Havdalah candle fresh, Motzei Shabbos. On Motzei Yom Kippur, you have to use a candle that was burning all of Yom Kippur. And this is the halacha l'maisa in Shulchan Aruch, that you take, whether the candle that you have in shul or at home, you have the yartzeit candle that's burning all of Yom Kippur, and that's what you have to use for the Havdalah, on Motzei Yom Kippur. Now the Gemara goes back to the previous machlekes regarding exactly when you make the bracha. Yeah, but only on a ner sheshavas. Rabbi mefazron. Rabbi would scatter the brachas, meaning he wouldn't make the brachas dafka all together on Havdalah on the kais. Rashi here says this is both regarding Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh and also regarding besamim. He would make the bracha as soon as he got besamim Motzei Shabbos. He made the bracha. As soon as he got fire, he made the bracha on that. Rab Chiya mekansan. Rab Chiya would bring them together and he would make the bracha when he made Havdalah. So then he would make also the brachas of Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh and Boirei Bina Besamim, like our minik today. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdi mi. Ava pisha Rabbi mefazron. Although Rabbi would make the brachas before, as soon as he had the first opportunity, chayze v'soideran ala kais. But nevertheless, when he came and he made the bracha on the kais again, k'dei lahaitzi is banav b'nei beisai. So he was then making the Havdalah for the people in his house. So then he would make again the bracha of Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh and Boirei Bina Besamim to be mighty the people of his family. This is a big chiddush because you see over here that even though he already made the bracha of Boirei Ma'irei Ha'esh before, right, so there's no need to make the bracha again. But nevertheless, to be mighty the people of his family, he was allowed to make the bracha again. This gets into a huge discussion regarding different things. Usually the halacha is, when it comes to birchas ha-mitzvahs, even if you made the bracha once, you can make the bracha a second time to be mighty other people. It comes to birchas ha-nenin, you can't be mighty anyone else if you made already the bracha yourself. But over here, l'chayre beide meire eish, beide mini besamim. This is a birchas hanenin. It's not a birchas mitzvah. It's a birchas hanenin that you're having hana from the fire or from the smell of the besamim. And nevertheless, even though Rebbe made the bracha before, he made the bracha again to be Maitzi's family. So by the beide mini besamim, it's not such a question because maybe he had besamim once, and now in a later time at the night he got besamim again when he made the Havdalah for his family. So you make a new bracha. But when you get to beide meire eish, how's he making the bracha again? It's not a birchas mitzvah. How's he being Maitzi then with this bracha? So mikan raya, many poskim say from here is a raya that because Chazal were masakin it to be part of the Havdalah, so it becomes like a birchas mitzvah, and you can be mighty someone else. And the similar thing is also when you get to mighty lechem and aretz for lechem mishnah, even though it's a birchas hanenin, but you can be mighty someone else with this bracha because it becomes like a birchas mitzvah as well. It goes so far that some Mefarshim say, this is a machlekes hapaiskim, but some say that even a person that can't smell, coming from Corona, can't smell, and you want to make a bracha beide mini besamim, so you're not smelling yourself. You can't make the bracha for yourself. Could you make the bracha if you're being mighty other people? So according to what Rebbe did, the answer is yes. As long as you're being mighty someone else, you can make the bracha beide mini besamim. But others argue. I believe the Taz, the Magen Avram, say no. If you can't smell yourself, you can't make the bracha.
What if the whole family can't smell?
Yeah.
You can't make Havdalah twice.
Huh? No, I don't think so. But another diak from this Gemara, by the way, is there's a famous shaila when it gets to women. It's machlokes whether women are chayiv in Havdalah or not. Kiddush, they're for sure chayiv. Havdalah, in Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe brings it that it's a suffix if women are chayiv or not. Here, the simple lashon of the Gemara, Banov u'bnei beisai, seems to include women as well. Although it's not a conclusive raya, but in the simple reading of it, it seems to include women as well. Now the Gemara goes to the whole inyan of fire. Fire being created on Matzah Shabbos. The reason we make the bracha on Matzah Shabbos is because that's the time when fire was created. So the Gemara is going to go through this discussion. Huh?
I hate to get Somim, not Havdalah.
On both, it goes on both. It goes on everything.
He's trying to make the design them the second time.
No, okay. Fragt the Gemara, v'or b'matzah Shabbos ivri, was fire created on Matzah Shabbos? V'hatanya, we have a brayso that says that fire was created before, on Erev Shabbos. The Brayso says as follows: Asara dvarim nivru b'erev Shabbos. There were 10 things that were created on Erev Shabbos. Bein hashmoshes, by twilight, right before Shabbos. And Elohein be'er, the be'er of Miriam, she didn't had in the midbar for 40 years. So that ability for it to give water was created at that time. Va'amon, the mon, and the keshes, the rainbow. Ksav, so Rashi's pshat, and there's a few pshatim that Rashi says Ksav refers to the letters of the luchais, umichtov, and the utensil that the Eibishter used to engrave these letters into the luchais, v'haluchais, and the actual luchais itself, the kivrei shel Moshe, the kever of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is a unique place, a unique thing in the world that layad eshes kfuras, could identify the place. Umayre, she'amid by Moshe v'Eliyahu, the cave where Moshe Rabbeinu stood, and Eliyahu and Novi was there as well. This is when the Eibishter said to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim, and he placed him over there in a cave, Samticha v'Nikras Atzur Ad Ovri. So that was a unique place of a unique revelation that was created. Also then, Psichas Pia Asen, the power of the donkey, of Bilam's donkey to speak. Psichas Pia Aretz, the mouth of the earth, Levloyas HaRashaim, to swallow the Rashaim in the time of Kairach. These things were created then. Rav Nechemia adds, Mishumav, in the name of his father, Afaor. Fire was also created out of Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes. Vehapered, and also a mule, which is a very interesting thing, because Rashi here says, really a mule is a hybrid that comes from a donkey and a horse. But nevertheless, Rashi says, Enkel Chodesh Tachas HaShemesh. So therefore, it was created originally by the time of Ben Hashmoshes and Erev Shabbos.
What was that mule for?
Rabbi Yeshi says, Mishum Aviv, in the name of his father, Afa Ayel, the ram that was there by the Akedah, that Avraham Avinu brought instead of Yitzchak, was also created in Erev Shabbos, the Hashamir, and also this worm that's called Shamir, that Shlomo HaMelech used to build a Beis HaMikdash when he had to cut something. So he didn't want to use an iron, a metal thing, so he used this worm. And Rabbi Yehuda says, Afatzvas, tongues as well. And Rabbi Yehuda would say, Tzafsa b'tzafsa misavda. How do you make tongues? You have to have other tongues to hold on the first tongues to be able to mold it. And v'tzafsa kamaisa manovet. So who made the first tongues? Halai ber yibidishamayim. Don't you have to say that this is created by the Eibishter? So therefore the first tongues were created by the Eibishter himself. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Omar lei, so they said to Rabbi Yehuda, the ones that argued with him, and said, no, To create the first tongues, you create a mold, and then you take melted iron and you put it into the mold, and it creates the tongues. You don't have to have other tongues to hold the first tongues. So therefore, we can say that this is created by a human being. It's not created by heaven. The first tongues was not created by the Eibishter. Okay, but why did the Gemara bring this entire Braise? What do we see here? One of the things that Rab Nechemya said was regarding fire. Fire was created on Erev Shabbos. So the Gemara, so like Kasha, it's not a question. Ha ba'ordi dan. When we're talking about fire that we have here in this world, that's one kind of fire. And ha ba'or Gehenim. And then there's a fire of Gehenim. Ordi dan, the fire we have here in this world, b'matzah Shabbos. That's created Matzah Shabbos. That's why then we make the bracha bar Meireyesh. Or the Gehenim be'erev Shabbos. The fire of the Gehenim, that's created on Erev Shabbos. Okay. The Rebbe speaks about this Gemara Barichas and the Sicha, when you get to all these inyanim here that are created on Erev Shabbos, that everything in the world is created imperfect. Ashabar Elokim Lasais, that a person has to perfect everything in the world. Ashenkin, most of these things that are mentioned over here, the Eibishter creates them, and it's not in our Aveda B'chlal to perfect them. They're created right before Shabbos, and it's sort of a Shabbos-dige creation. The Eibishter creates them perfect. All these things over here, whether it's the Leluchais and the Be'er and the Meire, most of these things are things that are created perfect. Doesn't need any human intervention to perfect them. Then the Rebbe says, on the other hand, there are certain things that are created here, and we'll see also in the continuation of the Gemara, more things that are created in a way that it's very difficult to utilize them in a purposeful way. Most things in the world, you use them and you elevate them, you can use them in a purposeful way. But there are many things in the world that are very, very negative, and it's very hard to use them in a purposeful way. And you have to have a tremendous Aveda to transform them from being harmful, from being destructive, to become positive and negative. Those things are also created at this time of Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashis, because it's related to a Shabbos de Gaveda, where you have to have a unique kayach of Shabbos to be able to transform these kinds of creations. So then the Rebbe, that's one vart the Rebbe says. Then the Rebbe says also when you get to the tzfas, this whole vart that Rabbi Yehuda says regarding the tongues, that you have one tongue that creates other tongues. So the Rebbe makes the same point. You have certain things in the world, you look at them, you see their purpose. You can use them l'shem shamayim. Then you see certain things in the world, you can't use them l'shem shamayim. It's impossible. You can use them to transform them, then it will lead to something else that will be used l'shem shamayim. The typical example of this is the concept of hechsher mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah itself, but it can lead you, it can help you, it can assist you to come to do a mitzvah. That's the concept of av tzvas b'tzvas asuya. When you have tongues, the tongues itself is going to be used for other tongues to be created, and then the second pair of tongues will be useful. But the first pair of tongues was only there for the second. So there's certain things in the world also that are created in such a way that you don't see the purpose in it itself. And you have to have a special kayach of Shabbos ben Hashmashis to be able to use it in a good way. Let's go back to the Sukkah here. So the Gemara now made this distinction that the fire of this world is created Matzah Shabbos. The fire of Gehenim is created on Erev Shabbos. So the Gemara asks on this: "Or the Gehenim be'erev Shabbos ivri." The fire of Gehenim was actually created on Erev Shabbos. But Vatanya and a Braisa we learned that Shiva Dvarim Nivru Kaidem Shenivra Olam. There are 7 things that are created before the world is created. And V'yelu Hein Teire Tshuva Gan Eden Gehenim Kisi Yakoved Beis Hamikdash Shmoi Shel Mashiach. Teire, the Chsev, and Teire, regarding Teire, it says, Hashem kanoni reishis darkei. Hashem acquired me in the beginning of his time, beginning of the way, before the world is created. Tshuva, the Chsev, beterem harim yuladu. Before the mountains, it was born. Chsev, and over there in that pasuk it says, Toshev and Shadaka, and v'toyim Shuva b'nei Yadam. So you see it refers to Tshuva that's created before the mountains, before the world. Gan Eden, the Chsev, Ayit Hashem Elokim, Gan Eden, Gan be'eden, mikedem, before the world. Gehenim d'chsev ki aruch me esmal tafta. Tafta is one of the names for Gehenim. We had a Gemara that said that there's 10 names for many names for Gehenim. One of the names is Tafta, which refers to a person that's gets persuaded by the Yetzer Hara to do Avedis, so he goes into Tafta, which is Gehenim. So it says aruch me esmal. It's created from before the time of the world. Kisei HaKavod Beis HaMikdash, also from before the world. D'chsev Kisei Kavod Morim. The Kisei Kavod is exalted, Merishain, from the first place. Makim Mikdashenu, that's also the place of the Beis HaMikdash. So they're both created before the world. And Shmai Shal Mashiach, the name of Mashiach, Yihi Shmai La'ilam, his name is forever. Lefnei Shemesh, Yinain Shmai. Even before the sun shined, his name is here. So we see that these are all the things that are created before. It's interesting, Shmoi Shel Mashiach, there's a difference, there's a Mefarshim talk about Shmoi Shel Mashiach. What's the pshat in the creation of a name? Some say that it's not really a creation. All the other things are really a creation. The name is not really a creation, it's the existence of Mashiach, it's the revelation of Mashiach. The whole purpose of the world is for Mashiach. So therefore it's one of the things that are there even before creation. So these are all things that are hecher from Welt. In the language of Chassidus, this is a concept of Lamaila Meseder Ishtalshalus. Things that Teire, Tshuva, all these things are higher than the world, and therefore they're created before the world, meaning they're Lamaila Meseder Ishtalshalus. What is one of the things that it said here? Gan Eden and Gehenim. Gan Eden is Schar Vaynish, and the whole union of Gan Eden and Gehenim precedes existence of the world. If so, how can we say it's created on Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes? So the Gemara makes a distinction within the existence of Gehenim itself. So Amri, they answered, Chalala hu de nivra kaidim shenivra ilam. The space of Gehenim is created before the world. But for Ordi Day, the fire of Gehenim that's in that space, Erev Shabbos, that was created on Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes. So we can still say what we said before. But the Gemara does not accept this. The Gemara brings a raya that we can't say that the fire of Gehenim was created on Erev Shabbos. But for Ordi Day, Erev Shabbos Ivri, the fire of Gehenim is created on Erev Shabbos. We learned in another brayso that it was created actually on the second day of creation. Fire that was created on the second day of creation, it can never be extinguished. Because this refers to the fire of Gehenim. Shenema, the pasuk says, "V'yatzu v'ro b'pigrei ha'anoshim." You go out and you see the corpses of the dead people. Ha'paishim be the ones that have sinned. Kitolatom le'tomos, the worms that eaten them will never die. Va'isham le'sichbe, and the fire that punishes them in Gehenim will never be extinguished. This is the fire of Gehenim that never gets extinguished. Why in the second day of creation does it not say Kitayv? Because the light of the fire of Gehenim is created in that day. But then Rabbi Lazar said, it does not say Kitayv on the second day of creation, but Chazar v'kalaloi b'shishi. It included the goodness of what's created on the second day in what it says on the sixth day. The Toiv Ma'od also includes the goodness of the second day. This is different than the typical medrash that's usually quoted. The Rebbe usually quotes the medrash that Hochbal by Kitayv on the third day of creation to make up of the lack of Kitayv on the second day. But the Gemara here says that it's on the sixth day that it says Toiv Ma'od to make up for the fact that it doesn't say Kitayv on the second day of creation. Right, so here's where you see that even the negativity that's created on the second day, ultimately it's not only Toiv, but it's really Toiv Ma'od. And it's true about every single existence of Chayshach and negativity that exists in the world, that even though externally it doesn't seem to be Toiv, but really it's Toiv Ma'od. It's famous Gemara that says when you get to the Yetzer Hara, to the Malach HaMavis, that he's called Toiv Ma'od. Right, so the same thing over here, the Gemara is saying that the negativity created on the second day is really Toiv Ma'od. And the Rebbe in a Sikha on a letter points out that this union of Gehenim being created on the second day of creation, the fire of Gehenim, is related to the whole union of separation of the Mayim Olyanim, Mayim Tachtainim. When you have a separation from the revelation of Elokus in the world, that brings about existence of Gehenim and the existence of the fire in Gehenim. These two things are related to each other. Kulpana, the question over here is that I see that the fire of Gehenim is created on the second day of creation. So therefore the Gemara now changes. Ella, what we have to say is as follows. Chalala, the space of the Gehenim, Kaidim Shenivra Ilam. That's created before the world. Ordi Day, the fire of Gehenim, B'Sheni B'Shabbos. That's created on Monday. The Ordi Dan, when it comes to our fire, B'Machshave, Oli Baris Berev Shabbos. The thought, the potential of this was created on Erev Shabbos. But V'Lei Nivra ad Matzah Shabbos. The fire didn't actually come out until Matzah Shabbos. And the Gemara brings a brayso for this. The Tanya, Rabbi Yesi Yaimer, Rabbi Yesi said, Shnei Dvarim Ola B'Machshave Li Baris Berev Shabbos. There were two things that Hashem had the thought to create on Erev Shabbos, but V'Lei Nivru. It didn't actually come out ad Matzah Shabbos. Until Matzah Shabbos. But Matzah Shabbos, Nosna Kodesh Baruch Hu Deya Ba'Adam Arishin. The Eibishter gave Adam Arishin the knowledge, Me'ein Dugma Shal Maila, similar to the Eibishter himself, and the Hevi Shnei Avanim, he brought two stones, V'tochnan Zu Bezu, and he rubbed them against one another, V'yatzeman Or, and it produced a fire. So the fire actually came out for the first time on Matzah Shabbos. And also, V'hevi Shtei Behemis, and he brought two animals, like a horse and a donkey, V'hirkiv Zu Bezu, and he cohabited them, V'yatzeman Pered. And the mule came out. So this is what happened on Matzah Shabbos. And that's why that's the time when we make the bracha, because that's the first time that the fire came into existence in actuality. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, regarding this thing about the peret, when the mule is created, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel argues and says, no, peret b'mei Anah haya. Peret was in the times of Anah. Anah is one of the descendants of Esav, as we'll see here, the Gemara brings the psukim. In his times is the first time when we find that a mule comes into existence. Shenema, the pasuk says, Hu Anah, this individual Anah, asher matzah yemim b'midbar. He finds the yemim in the midbar. So what's the yemim? Yemim are mules. So we see that he's the one that discovered, or he's the one that brought about this existence of the mules in the world. Okay, so now the Gemara explains who this Anah was, and why is it him specifically that brought the mules into the world. Those that darshan, explain the difficult psukim in the Torah said, Anah pasal haya, Anah himself was a mamzer, he was a pasal, and therefore he brought about the mule, which is also a pasal. It's a hybrid of a donkey and a horse. Shanama, the pasuk says, Eila b'nei seir achayri. These are the children of Seir Achayri. And what does it say in the continuation of that pasuk? So you have the quoted here on the side of the Gemara. The children of Seir Achayri were Loiton, Shoival, Tzivain, and Anah. So in this pasuk we see that Tzivain and Anah were brothers. In another pasuk it says, Elu b'nei Tzivain. Who are the children of Tzivain? The Aya v'Anah. Aya and Anah were children of Tzivain. So we have a question over here. Is Tzivain the father of Anah, or is Tzivain a brother of Anah? So Ela Melamed, what this teaches me is Shabbat Tzivan Alimai. Tzivan had relations with his mother, and V'hailed Mimeno Anah, and that from that Anah was born. So Anah was both the brother of Tzivain and the son of Tzivain. So he was a mamzer. So therefore he's the one that brought the mule into the world. Frakta Gemara, how do we know that that's true? Maybe there were two Anahs. We find many times in Torah two people that have the same name, and maybe there were two different descendants of Esav that both had the name Anah. Says the Gemara, no, that's not true. And the Gemara says the answer with a short introduction here. Omar Rava, so Rava answered this question and said, Amina Milsa, I'll give you an answer, I'll say something, the Shvar Malka Layomra. Even Shvar, the king Shvar, which was a Persian king, even the Persian king didn't say this answer. Now he wasn't talking about the Persian king. It was just a nickname, a title. Who was he referring to? Umanu Shmuel. He was referring to Shmuel. As Rashi explains, Shmuel was such a baki in all the halachis, and we always paskin like Shmuel, so therefore Shmuel is like a king, that his word is always listened to. So therefore he was referring to Shmuel. So Rav is saying, I'll give you an answer that even Shmuel couldn't answer this, didn't say this. Or Ikad Amri, others said, Rav Papa said the same thing, but Rav Papa said, Amina Milsa, I'll give you an answer, the Shvar Malkal Yamra, that the king Shvar did not say this. Umanu Rava, who is this Rava? Or others are greatest here, Rabba. That Rabba didn't even say this answer. What's this answer? Makra, the pasuk over here says, Hu Anah. This is the same Anah. Hu Anah de Meikara. Meaning we're talking about the same Anah that we spoke about before. It's not two different people. It's the same person. I'm not sure what's so incredible about this answer that the Gemara gives this introduction, that this drasha of Hu Anah is such an incredible answer that even Shmuel or Rabbi didn't say this answer. Shvar Malka. It's interesting that the Gemara gives this introduction here. Okay. Tana Rabbanan. Gemara brings again a brayso that says the exact same thing we said before about the things that were created out of Shabbos Bein Hashmashos, and I add some more. Asar Dvarim Nivru out of Shabbos Bein Hashmashos. There were 10 things that were created out of Shabbos. Ve'eluhein, Be'er, Mum, Keshes, Aksav, Amichtav, Aluchas, Kivrishal Moshe, Mayrisham, B'Moshe V'Eliyahu, Psichas Pi'asim, Psichas Pi'aretz, Levloya Sarashot. So those are the things that we all spoke about before already. Now, V'yashayimrim, others add more and say, Af Maklei Shel Arin, the stick of Aaron, after the whole story of Kairach, when his stick grew almonds on it, so that unique stick was created then as well. Shkeidel, its almonds, u'prochel, and its flowers as well. V'yashayimrim, others say Afa Mazikin. Also, the Mazikin in the world were created.
How could the stick have already had the almonds?
The potential. Everything that we're talking about over here is the potential of it, just like the Pia Osain, the potential. Mazikim were also created at that time. In other words, all kinds of shadim. V'yashayimrim, and others say Af Bigdash Shel Adam Marishin. A unique garment that Adam Rishon wore. Rashi has two pshatim for this. One pshat Rashi says is Adam Rishon wore a garment that had the form of pictures of animals on it, and he wore it, and then it was given over to Nimrod, and so on. Or this is the Kosnais Oir, the garments that were made from oir, from hide, that the Eibusha created and gave Adam Rishon. This was created out of Shabbos Ben Hashmashos. Tana Rabbanan and Abrayis, it says Shiva Dvarim Mechusim Ibnei Adam. There are 7 things that are hidden of a person, and it's all for a reason. Neilohein Yom HaMisa, the day a person dies, is not known to a person. So that a person should always think. If a person knows when he dies, then life wouldn't be the same. A person has to always think and do because he never knows when the time is. This is in the Maimah Basi Legani talks about this. A person never knows when his time comes. The Yom HaNachama, the time of consolation. So there's 2 pshatim with this. Rashi says when a person has anxiety of something and he's worried about something, you never know when you're going to be relieved of that. Others say it actually refers to the coming of Mashiach. Oymek Hadin, the depth of knowing how to paskin a din properly. So again, there's 2 pshatim in this. Rashi says one pshat is most ayanim that paskin a din. It's very difficult to actually know the real psak din properly. You listen to the witnesses, you listen to the testimony, to evidence, but to really paskin properly is not so simple. Another pshat Rashi says is the oymek adin of la'asad lavai. That's something that's concealed of us. We don't know what's going on in the heart of our friend. And you don't know where you can make the most profit in business. Umalchus beis David masay tachser, and when the kingdom of David will return, which seemingly also refers to the coming of Mashiach. Umalchus chayeves masay tichla, and the kingdoms of the world that are chayeves, that have to be wiped out, that are subjugating Yidden, when are they going to be destroyed? So that's also something that we don't know. There are 3 things that the Eibusha had the thought to create. If the Eibusha wouldn't have had the thought to create them, dinu sheyalu, it would be the right thing that they should be created. And the Eibusha actually did do these things. The body of a dead person will have a bad odor. And the Rashi says the reason is because otherwise you wouldn't bury a person. You would leave him there, and he would always bring you pain. He would always be a reminder of the loss. So the Eibusha created in a way that you bury him. And that a person that passes away, he gets forgotten from the heart. So a person shouldn't live with sorrow forever. And that grain, if you store it for too long, it eventually rots. Otherwise, people would hoard wheat, and it would create a shortage of grain in the market. And others say that there should be a circulation of coins, even though the circulation of money, the value that money has, is really not the true value, especially today with paper money. It doesn't have the true value of money, but nevertheless, David should create the nature of the world. There should be a circulation of money so that people should be able to buy and sell things, even things that they need that they don't have, relying on the circulation of money. Zakta Mishnah. Going back to the Makim Shenagu, so the Mishnah brings here another thing that's connected to a minig. Makim Shenagu lasas malacha b'Tisha B'Av, in a place that is accustomed to work on Tisha B'Av, oisen, they can work. Makim Shenagu shaloi lasas malacha, in a place where the custom is not to work, ein oisen, you don't work. In all places, Talmidei Chachamim b'Teilim. The Talmidei Chachamim should not work because it takes their mind off the focus of Tisha B'Av to mourn the Churban Beis Hamikdash. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, a person should always consider himself to be a Talmid Chacham, and he should not work on Tisha B'Av. Zok the Gemara, Amar Shmuel ain't Tainis Sibur b'Bavel. There's no Tainis Sibur with all of the stringencies that a Tainis Sibur has in Bavel. There's the Gemara in Tainis discusses all the different tiniest Sibur that they would fast in Eretz Yisrael when there was a drought, and they had to fast, and they began the fast from the night before. That's one stringency. And also, they didn't work. There's many stringencies that there are regarding these fasts. All these stringencies don't apply in Bavel. Ela Tisha B'Av Bulvad, only regarding Tisha B'Av. Says the Gemara, Lemeimre, shall we say, the Sava Shmuel, that Shmuel holds, that Tisha B'Av ben Hashmasha Shaloi Aser. That Tisha B'Av, even ben Hashmasha, it would be Aser. That's what we see from here, that by Tisha B'Av, the stringencies of all the fasts does apply, that it begins from ben Hashmashas. But for Ha'ama Shmuel, didn't Shmuel say, Tisha B'Av ben Hashmashas Shaloi Mutter? Shmuel himself said that Tisha B'Av, the ben Hashmashas, you can still eat. Now, V'chi Teime, Kasava Shmuel, maybe Shmuel holds, called Tainis Sibur ben Hashmashas Shaloi Mutter. Maybe all the other Tainis Sibur, it's also permitted to eat by the ben Hashmashas. So therefore, it's similar to the other fasts. But V'ha'anan Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Eichlen v'Shaisim mibayid yaim, that by all the tiniest tzibur, you can eat when it's still day. What does that mean, you can eat when it's still day? Lomute mai, what does that exclude? Lav lemute ben hashmashis. Doesn't that mean that as soon as it comes to the ben hashmashis of a fast, you have to stop eating? So therefore we see that by all fasts, ben hashmashis, you're not allowed to eat. Says the Gemara, loy, not necessarily. Lomute mishachashecha. It only comes to exclude that when it's actually fully dark, then you're not allowed to eat. But by ben hashmashis, you're still allowed to eat. And this is the opinion of Shmuel. By all tiniest tzibur, and by Tisha B'Av, you're still allowed to eat by twilight, by Ben Hashmashis. Shall we say that we have a proof for Shmuel's opinion? Ein bein Tisha B'Av, and the Brayse it says, Ein bein Tisha B'Av l'Yom Kippurim. There's no distinction between Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. They both have the same stringencies. Ela shezeh sfeikei yosef v'zeh sfeikei mutter. When it comes to Yom Kippur, the suffix of Yom Kippur will be forbidden. The suffix of Tisha B'Av will be permitted. What is this referring to? My sveikei mutter. What does it mean that the suffix is permitted? Lav, doesn't this mean ben hashmashis, referring to the time of ben hashmashis, which is a time which is a suffix, that time period will be mutter, exactly like Shmuel said. Says the Gemara, no. My sveikei mutter, when the Brayse said sveikei mutter, lav ben hashmashis, it doesn't refer to ben hashmashis. Second, where am I over here? My sveikei mutter lav ben hashmashis. Don't you think that it refers to ben hashmashis? Says the Gemara, loy. It doesn't refer to that. Kid Amar Rav Sheisha b'rei Ravidi. What Rav Sheisha said in the name, son of Ravidi said, Idi again. Kid Amar Rav Sheisha b'rei Rav Idi lekviyeh de yarche. What it refers to is to establish the day, not ben hashmashis, but it refers to establishing the right day. To knowing if it's Tisha B'Av or it's not Tisha B'Av, maybe if you don't know if the month before had 30 days or that only 29 days, to know it's the right day of Tisha B'Av. And same thing with Yom Kippur, to know that it's the right day of Yom Kippur. What we're talking about over here is to know that it's the right day of the month. Okay, so there's a machlekes of Rashi and Tosfos about this. According to Rashi, the pshat over there is very simple. When you don't have the right day of the month, so we know when you get to all Yom Tovim, there's Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius. You have to do 2 days. So Rashi says the same thing would be regarding Yom Kippur, that you have to make 2 days of Yom Kippur, but not for Tisha B'Av. You don't have to have 2 days of Tisha B'Av. Tosfos over here says no, it doesn't refer to that. There's no 2 days of Yom Kippur if you don't know the kviyas of the month. But it refers to a person that's in the desert and someone that doesn't know b'chlal what the day of the week is. He doesn't know which he has a suffix regarding the day of Yom Kippur. How Bezdin made the Chaydish, not the day of the week, but he has a suffix about the day of the Chaydish. Regarding such a person, he would have to keep 2 days of Yom Kippur. So Dr. Gemara weiter, some more details about Yom Kippur. Darash Rava. Rava taught as follows. Ubrais uminikais misanais umashlimis bay. When it comes to women that are pregnant or are feeding their babies, so they have to fast and complete their fast. Kederach shemisanis umashlimis b'yom kippurim. Just like in Yom Kippur, they have to fast fully. So too on Tisha B'Av, they have to fast. But ubein hashmashis shalei aser, and also bein hashmashis of Yom Kippur and the bein hashmashis of Yom Kippur will be aser. Rabbi Yechanan said the same thing. Asks the Gemara, Rabbi Yechanan hachi, did Rabbi Yechanan say this? But Rabbi Yechanan said, Tisha B'Av einek a tainis tzibor. Tisha B'Av is not compared to a tainis tzibor. Regarding what did he say? That Tisha B'Av is not compared to a tainis tzibor. My love, don't you think lebein hashmashis? He said this regarding bein hashmashis, that all tiniest tzibor are also by bein hashmashis, but Yom Kippur is not also bein hashmashis. Says the Gemara, loy. He was only saying it regarding work. That by all tiniest tzibur, and Eretz Yisrael we're talking about, when they fasted for a tiniest tzibur, for a drought, they had to fast, and starting even from Ben Hashmashis, but not for Tisha B'Av. Says the Gemara, Malacha, to say that Tisha B'Av is not like the tiniest tzibur regarding work, Tanina, that's what we learned in the Mishnah. Makim shenago lasas malacha b'Tisha B'Av. Aisin, in a place where the custom is to work, you can do work. Or b'makom shenago shalei lasas, ein aisin. In a place where the minig is not to do work, you don't do work. So you see over here that Tisha B'Av is not the same like the rest of the fasts. It's totally in the minig. So we don't need Rabbi Yechanan to tell this to us. Even Rav Shimon Gamliel that says that on Tisha B'Av everybody shouldn't work. In the Mishnah we just learned, Rav Shimon Gamliel said that everyone should consider themselves like a Talmud Chacham and shouldn't work. Loy Omar Ela Dechi Yosef, but Loy Ovid, if you're not going to work, Loy Mechsiki Yura, it's not going to look like you're a Baal Gaiva. So therefore you could and should prevent yourself, refrain from working on Tisha B'Av. But not that it's a Isser, that you shouldn't work on Yom Kippur, on Tisha B'Av that is. So we already see from the Mishnah at this point, Avol Meiser Lo Yasser, there's no Isser to work on Tisha B'Av. So Rabbi Yechanan couldn't mean to say that Tisha B'Av is compared to other fasts that you don't work. Ella rather, my enika tainis sibur. What does it mean that it's not like all other tainis sibur? The tefillas ne'ilah. This is regarding the tefillah of ne'ilah. On the tainis sibur that the Gemara discusses, when there was a drought, there was the tefillah of ne'ilah, like a Yom Kippur. Fragt the Gemara, Rabbi Yechanan himself said, Ulavai sheyispal adam v'hailach kol hayom kuloi. Halavai, a person should daven all day. So to add an extra tefillah on Tisha B'Av for tefillas ne'ilah is a good idea. It doesn't matter. Rashi here says, if Rabbi Yechanan is saying that you should daven all day, so therefore you can add another tefillah of ne'ilah on Tisha B'Av. Why not? So therefore, it can't be l'chayre that this is what Rabbi Yechanan said. And says the Gemara, no, hasam chayva, hacha rishus. When it comes to the tiniest sibur, you have a chiyuv. You must daven ne'ilah, like on Yom Kippur. When it comes to Tisha B'Av, if you want, you could daven ne'ilah, but you don't have to. Another point that Rabbi Yechanan meant to say when he was saying that Tisha B'Av is not like tiniest sibur, my enika tiniest sibur le'esrim va'arba. On a tiniest sibur, the Gemara says that they added 6 brachas to the Shemay Esrei, and it was in total 24 brachas. But on Tisha B'Av, you don't add these brachas to the Shemay Esrei. Rav Papa says a different shot. When it comes to the tiniest sibur, there were actually 2 categories of tiniest sibur. The drought in Eretz Yisrael, there was the tiniest sibur until Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and then there's the tiniest sibur after Rosh Chodesh Kislev. The severity of the fasts and the tiniest sibur after Rosh Chodesh Kislev is much stronger. So therefore, Rav Papa explains, my einik tiniest sibur einoi kirishainis. We don't compare Tisha B'Av to the first group of tiniest sibur before until Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Elokach reinis. We compare it to the second group of the tiniest sibur, which comes after Rosh Chodesh Kislev, the asura, and therefore it's asa to do work by ben hashmashas, or it's asa to eat, that is, by ben hashmashas, like the second group of the tiniest sibur. So Rabbi Yechanan was actually saying this to be stringent, not to be lenient, to compare it to the second group of the tiniest sibur. I'll ask a question from a Braise. It says, there's no distinction between Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. We quoted before, the suffix on Yom Kippur is aser, and the suffix on Tisha B'Av is permitted. What does it mean, Sveikei Mutter? Lav ben hashmashas shaloi. Don't you think this is referring to ben hashmashas? So we see that ben hashmashas is permitted to do work. As we said before already, it's referring to the day of the month that if you'd have to fast 2 days or 1 day. Could you learn out now from this Braise that other than this detail, Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av are the same? This would be a proof to what Rabbi Lazar said. Rabbi Lazar says, a person is not allowed to stick his finger into water, Tisha B'Av, just like on Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to stick your finger into water. That's one of the things. The affliction of Yom Kippur is that you're not allowed to bathe, or you're not allowed to even stick your finger into water. The same thing on Tisha B'Av, you're not allowed to stick your finger into the water. So from this Braisa we could see this comparison. But on this, the Gemara asks a question, Meisvei, in that same Braisa, it continues and says, Ein bein Tisha B'Av l'tainis sibur. There's no distinction between Tisha B'Av and the tainis sibur. El shezeh asa basiyas malacha. On a tainis sibur, you're not allowed to do work. V'zeh muta basiyas malacha. And on Tisha B'Av, there's no issur of doing work. And b'makim shenagu, in a place where there's a minhag that you work. Sahal l'chol devreim zeh v'zeh shavin. Otherwise, Tisha B'Av and the other fasts are the same. And what does it say regarding a tainis sibur? On a regular tainis sibur, you shouldn't be bathing. You shouldn't bathe your entire body. Your feet, your hands, your face, you're allowed to put it into water on a tainis sibur. So the question over here is, what are we comparing Tisha B'Av to? Are we comparing Tisha B'Av to Yom Kippur? You're not allowed to even put a finger into water to relieve yourself? Or are we comparing Tisha B'Av to the tiniest, that you're only not allowed to bathe yourself fully, but you're allowed to put your finger into water? So that's the contradiction here. Rav Papa says, Rav Papa, Tana, Kuli Katani. This Tana that's comparing Tisha B'Av to Yom Kippur, or is comparing Tisha B'Av to the other fasts, he's only comparing it to point out the leniencies of Yom Kippur. Don't be medayik regarding the putting your finger into water or regarding bathing. He's not talking about that. He's not talking about the stringency of Tisha B'Av. He's only comparing it regarding the leniency, that there's a suffix that would be allowed, or that you're allowed to do work. He's only focusing on the leniencies. But regarding the stringency of not bathing, that's something that he didn't focus on at all. So therefore you can't be medayik anything from there, so there's no contradiction at all.